Hello. Today we will talk about all the common mistakes that people make. The first mistake: bananas grow on trees. The misconception is that bananas do not grow on trees, but on plants that belong to the Musaceae family. These plants are considered herbaceous because their trunks are pseudostems that consist of narrow leaves. Bananas actually grow from a flower that forms at the end of the stem, known as a tassel. When bananas grow to maturity, they can be plucked from the plant and may look like fruits growing on trees, but they are not trees in the true sense of the word. Here are some examples of how you can correct this mistake. Information resources, websites, books, or articles about botany can include correct information about how bananas grow. Educational programs, schools and universities can include lessons about botany in their curricula that address how bananas actually grow. The next misconception is that the Earth is a ball. The misconception that the Earth is a sphere originated a long time ago, when scientific research and technology were less developed. However, modern science confirms that the Earth is roughly spherical, but with a slight aberration caused by its rotation. There are several ways that can correct this error and confirm that the Earth is indeed not a full sphere. Space images. Modern space agencies, such as NASA and the European Space Agency, regularly send images of the Earth from space, where its spherical shape can be seen. Flying to high altitudes. People who have had the opportunity to stay at high altitudes, such as in airplanes or on mountains, can see the curvature of the Earth. The next misconception is that humans have 5 senses. The misconception that humans have only 5 senses is quite common, but not true. In fact, human perception is much more complex and includes many other senses and ways of perceiving. Here are some examples of common misconceptions and other senses. Other basic senses. In addition to the 5 basic senses, sight, hearing, smell, taste, and touch, there are other important senses such as smell, spatial, temperature, body kinetic, and many others. Emotional feelings. Humans also have emotional feelings such as joy, sadness, fear, surprise, anger, and others that affect their perception of the world around them. The next misconception is that alcohol warms you up. The misconception that alcohol warms you up is a common one, but it is actually dangerous. Alcohol dilates blood vessels, which can lead to a feeling of warmth, but this does not mean that it actually warms the body. On the contrary, the feeling of warmth can be a masking of the body's actual heat loss, which can lead to hypothermia or other undesirable consequences. Here are some examples. Hiking in the mountains. People may consume alcohol while hiking in the mountains, believing that it will help them stay warm in cold conditions. However, this can lead to dilated blood vessels and heat loss, especially at high altitudes. The next mistake is that forbidden fruit was on apple. The misconception that fruit grows on an apple tree is common but not true. In fact, apples are the fruit of a plant, not a tree itself. The apple tree is the tree on which the apple fruit grows. Here are some examples of this misconception. Images in art. Often in drawings, paintings, or graphs, you can see an apple tree with apple fruit growing directly on the branches, which can give a misleading impression of what fruit growth looks like. The next misconception is that Santa Claus was created by Coca-Cola. The misconception that Santa Claus was created by Coca-Cola is a widespread myth, but it is not true. Santa Claus is an image that emerged from a synthesis of different cultural and religious traditions, and Coca-Cola helped spread his popularity through advertising campaigns. Here are some examples of this misconception. Coca-Cola advertising campaigns. In the 1930s, the Coca-Cola Company launched a series of advertising campaigns that depicted Santa Clauses in red suits. Similar to the colors of these advertisements helped spread the image of Santa Claus, but were not the first reason for his creation. The next misconception is that Roman statues are white. The misconception that Roman statues were white is common, but not true. In fact, many Roman statues were painted, not white. Here are some examples of this misconception. Restored statues. Research shows that many Roman statues and sculptures were painted to give them a realistic appearance. With the help of the latest technology and archaeological research, it has been possible to restore the color schemes of many ancient sculptures. Contemporary artists and restorers create reconstructions of ancient statues based on archaeological findings and recovered color schemes. These reconstructions show that many Roman sculptures had bright colors. The next misconception is that the pyramids were built by slaves. The misconception that the pyramids were built by slaves is common, but it does not actually correspond to the historical truth. The construction of the pyramids in ancient Egypt was a complex and multi-layered process involving various social groups, including artisans, villagers, and specialized workers. Here are some examples of this misconception. Archaeological research. Studies of the Egyptian pyramids have proven that construction was carried out mainly by professional workers, not slaves. Findings of warehouses and working tools show that people who worked on the construction of the pyramids were paid and provided with food. The next misconception is that the Far West was brutal. The misconception that the Wild West was predominantly violent and bloody is a common myth created mainly by popular culture, such as film and literature. While there was violence and conflict in the Wild West, it was not as systematic and all-consuming as is often imagined. Here are some examples of this misconception. Historical documents. Many historical documents and studies indicate that many aspects of life in the Wild West were more peaceful and organized than is portrayed in popular movies and books. Another misconception is that witches were burned alive. The misconception that witches were burned alive is widespread, but it does not correspond to the historical truth. In medieval and early modern Europe, there were discoveries and prosecutions of those suspected of witchcraft or witches. However, methods of punishment varied by region and era, and burning at the stake was not the only form of punishment. Here are some examples of this misconception. Variety of punishment methods. During the period of witch persecution, a variety of punishment methods were used, such as hanging, strangulation, drowning, and others. Burning was one of the possible methods, but not the only one. The next misconception is that fortune cookies are Chinese. The misconception that apron cookies are Chinese is common, but in fact, this appetizer has a lot in common with Japanese cuisine. Here are some examples of this misconception. Origin. Apron cookies are typically associated with Chinese culture because of their popularity in Chinese restaurants and prevalence in Chinese cuisine. However, their true origin is in Japan. History. Apron cookies, which have pieces of paper with prophecies or positive messages inside, were first made in the United States in the late 19th or early 20th century by Japanese immigrants.